You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
I'm Jana Ireijo, and I'm a muralist.
Hello and welcome to Art, the podcast where we get to know women from around the world of visual arts. I'm Chris Stafford, and this is Season 3, Episode 17. My guest this week is the Hawaiian-born muralist Jana Ireijo, whose passion as a conservation artist is born out of a love of art that started at a very young age. Jana creates vanishing murals using charcoal gathered from areas recently affected by wildfires. This material, formed by the heat of the flames, carries the story of destruction and renewal that is intrinsic to the natural world. She says her art is a reflection of the transience and impermanence of life and nature. Born in Honolulu in 1968, Jana has spent most of her life in transit, leaving the island for California before attending grad school in New York. Then, as a divorced woman, to Connecticut, where she raised her family, and finally returning to Hawaii in 2023, where she has come full circle. Jana is the eldest of 3 children. She has a younger sister and brother. Her parents, Rona August, a realtor, father James Ireijo, and stepfather Joel August, both attorneys. They encouraged her as a child to explore the arts, taking her to museums and galleries, and ensuring she always had access to arts and crafts. It was her mother that recognized a natural talent and told Jana she would become an artist. When the time came to choose her career path, Jana was drawn to advertising, and after graduating from H.P. Baldwin High School in Maui in 1986, she headed for the University of Hawaii at Manoa to earn a BFA in graphic design in 1991. She then attended the Pratt Institute in New York, where she earned an MFA in painting in 1999. Jana then took 10 years off from her art to raise a family, before turning her hand to public murals and developing her own style. Now back in the islands as an empty nester, Jana has immersed herself in her passion for environmental issues such as the ocean, deep-sea mining, and helping her community. She is also working on her first book for children, entitled Vanishing Moon. Jana, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, all the way from Hawaii.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, set the scene for us. What does it look like from your studio?
I have an amazing view. I can see the mountains and towards the sea. So you can tell it's summer. It's a little overcast, and I can see the clouds that will clear to probably a bright blue sunny day in Hawaii. So I'm very fortunate.
So you have very good light then in your studio?
Yes, but it's so hot. I keep the windows closed, but it's really, it's bright all the time.
You're now settled for the past 2 years near Diamond Head, for those who are familiar with Hawaii. But you've been such a traveler, Jana. I don't know where to begin with your journey. Where would you begin? At the beginning, where you were born and how you've circled back to Hawaii?
Yeah, I've moved over 40 something times, not necessarily state to state or country to country, but in different homes. And for no one reason, I was born in Honolulu. My first family house was in Nanakuli. My dad was a teacher. And then we moved to California. My dad went to law school. We spent, a few years in California. And, throughout the years, I've moved for various family reasons. I was in Maui for a large part of my life. Went to college back in Honolulu, got married, and just moved a lot for my ex-husband's work or school. And we settled in Connecticut for about 12 years. And once my kids grew up, graduated and went off to college, I moved back home to Honolulu. So yeah, it's been a long journey and really happy to be back home though.
Was it kind of inevitable that your journey would circle back to Hawaii?
I think when I moved away, initially I moved to, after undergraduate school, moved to New York. And I think I might have thought that was a one-way ticket to New York City. I always wanted to go to school there and live there. I've been so happy in every state, every town I lived in. So every time I moved, I thought, this is it. I'm going to make the most of it, kind of settle into community. And I never thought I would move. So 40 something times later, I knew that it was a big decision. I could stay in Connecticut or come back home to the islands where my family was, where my parents were, and really become invested in the community. And yes, I think deep down, yes, it was inevitable that I would come back home.
Your heart is there and your soul.
Yeah. And feeling, even before the wildfires in Maui, I knew that a lot of people were moving away, and I wanted to be a part of returning to Maui, even though I'm not there right now, and just be a part of the future.
Has it inspired your art more to be back in Hawaii? Or do you think that has changed over the years?
It's inspired my art more now because there's a real sense of community in Hawaii. It's so small that, you run into different people that have played many roles in your life. So everyone knows each other, either they're related or went to school or work with, so what's inspiring to me is that if there's an issue in the community, we all feel it. And I love the way the community comes together to work on these larger issues or goals, whether it's something traumatic like the wildfires or working towards something, positive. We all kind of get involved. And that's really been inspiring to me, showing what can be done regardless of political parties or views, because we're just kind of used to working together and putting aside personal differences.
Tell us what it was like growing up in Hawaii. Jana, you were born in 1968 in Honolulu, as you said, and you have a sister and a brother. Where do you fall chronologically?
I'm the oldest.
And how did that represent itself when you were younger? Did you feel like you were much the oldest and there were expectations of you that might have been different for your siblings?
Yes. I think like a typical oldest child, I probably took on a lot and probably thought I was right all the time and that the younger one should listen to me. Growing up here, and I was also the oldest of a bunch of cousins. So, we, on the summers and weekends, we just went to grandma's house and both grandma's houses. And we were it just felt like we were let loose wild. I mean, I remember growing up, with my cousins and just like a pack would go into the stream and try to build boats and catch the bus to the beach and go to the library and roam around. And I think it was only moving away that I realized how much we were connected to nature. And my dad would take us to the beach every weekend, different beaches around the island. So all of us would be piled into his little car, and we just kind of grew up really comfortable in the water, fighting and playing. And I did feel like I was responsible for, all my younger cousins. But at the same time, it was, I think growing up in Hawaii, you just really don't realize how much nature is a part of us. And as I got older in high school, we would go to the beach and then go to the stream. And, there were no phones. And I think we were always in nature, looking for our friends, listening to music. And now when I move back, I look at it with new eyes, like how I would never go into the stream. It's probably dirty or, so I think that the health of nature became something I don't take it for granted.
Does this mean you were a great swimmer and surfer? It always seems that is like second nature to any Hawaiian, that you're going to be natural in water and do all those water sports.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Yeah. I grew up really comfortable in the water because my dad, who was a surfer, made sure that we could float. He would say, you have to be able to float for an hour just in case you get, washed out to the deep. And so he would kind of teach us to float on our back and do this dead man's float. And there's a saying that we all grew up with, never turn your back to the ocean. So we grew up respecting the water, but it's not that common unfortunately, for a lot of people to learn how to swim. My dad happened to learn to swim because he was a surfer. His parents moved to Waikiki when he was young. But I would say a lot of people don't know how to swim, which is really awful considering we're on an island. And I think drowning is one of the leading causes of death for kids in Hawaii. So that's something I'm really passionate about too. The fact that we all should learn to swim because we're on an island. But I'm very comfortable in the water. But it was on Connecticut where I actually learned to open water swim and swim competitively in triathlons. And I think when you do grow up in the water or the streams or hiking, you do tend to feel more protective of the environment. So that's another reason why I'm super inspired to be back in Hawaii, feeling like I can create art to highlight different issues of the beaches and the streams that I really love.
Are you still a triathlete?
No, I started running when I was in my 40s. I accidentally joined a triathlon gym in Connecticut, and I said, I'm going to learn to swim. So I did that. And at that point, I might also start cycling. And that was something that really first brought the awareness of how a stream can be cleaned up or a river. Because I did the New York City triathlon and the swim was in the Hudson River. And I was like, oh, that doesn't seem so clean. But then there was this whole, they were really celebrating the fact that the Hudson River had been cleaned after all these years of being really polluted. And that was really, well, it's like, wow, if we can swim in here, you can really improve the environment. So that was very eye-opening.
Were you age grouped in triathlon?
Yes. Yeah. I was in the 40s, 45s. Yeah. I still run. I don't, bike or swim anymore.
So would you say you're very competitive?
Yes. I like that. I guess triathlons, you always are racing in your age group, and it wouldn't be fun if I was just swimming, cycling, or running without that. But I also know that I'm just driven to, if I choose a hobby or have a goal, I'm just really driven to be the best that I can. And I really love when everyone around me is doing the same. Like, I also think that, there's, so I'm competitive mostly with myself, but I enjoy the competitive nature of, sports for sure.
So was that evident then when you were a child? Aside from the water sports, were you very sporty in school?
Not at all. In fact, I was really shy. I would say all my friends in high school, anyone who had known me before would have the last person to start running or be on I'd never been on a team. I mean, I was a cheerleader, but I was the person who was picked last for sports. I was really shy. I was always reading. I grew up dancing, so maybe was the most competitive, but we weren't even, I did like performing, but no, I was never athletic, but running, you can the more you do it, you get better. And being in that triathlon gym with great coaches, I think whatever you do, you could find a great coach to, become good at it. And, so I credit it all to the great coaches I had.
Were you competitive with your siblings?
I don't think so. I think as an oldest child, maybe, besides the part about feeling I know better, my sister and my brother and I all recognized that my mother did a really good job of kind of celebrating all our differences and not creating an environment of competition within us. That I think we all really appreciate. We're very supportive of each other.
Arts, of course, is a very singular occupation, but it sounds as if it was something that you felt comfortable with from a very early age, and you were always encouraged by your family to participate. Do you know where that came from? What the initial interest was in arts as a child?
Some of my first memories are of me drawing in front of a window, just looking out the window and drawing the field that was outside. So I think my mom must have seen that at a really young age, 2, 3, 4 years old. I think she must have seen me some creative streak enough to buy me these really expensive colored pencils and put me into art classes. So I think she must have seen that I really liked it at that young age. It just always felt like an escape, and I remember being pretty young when I started.
What sort of age would you have been?
When we lived in the house where I can see that window, I would have been, and my babysitter at that time said that my mom had always said, Jana's going to be a painter, specifically a painter. I would have been 4 and 5.
And it was a long time, was it, before you realized that your mother spoke some very true words, that was what you were destined to be?
Yeah, I I took I like to draw. And at some point, but we didn't have a lot of art classes in public school back then. She always put me into art class. I love dancing. And when I had to choose a major in undergraduate school, I had this vague idea I was going to go into advertising. And I chose graphic design. But it wasn't until I took my first painting class, and she would always say, I think you're going to be a painter. And I was like, no, it's messy. The art room, there's weird people. And it's just messy and weird people in the paint. And I think I had to take a painting class in in the graphic design program. And I took acrylics, and that was okay. But it was the day I took oil painting, and I can just remember it just came over me. At this point, I'm in my early 20s, and I said, this is it. I knew I could make oil paint do whatever I wanted it to do. And I can remember the smell and the way it felt. And, it took over 20 years, but my mom was right. Like, I don't know how she knew painting specifically, but it was really true.
What kind of things were you painting back then, Jana? What was inspiring you?
My teachers, I had a really amazing undergraduate foundation experience at University of Hawaii, and it was pretty formal. We had very old school, like drafting and figure drawing and all the fundamentals. And so once we got past that, I had a really good figure painting teacher. But as we got higher in the program and were more free to draw what we wanted, the teachers were inspired by that kind of California, like Diebenkorn. The artist who does the slices of cake. So I would say it's a very California-inspired abstract expressionism that I really loved that. But it was oil painting, and we had a great studio with a lot of room and places to store large paintings. I remember thinking, I'm going to do really large paintings so no one knows that I'm short and a female. Like, I had this just going to do these really big, large scale paintings. And, but once I moved to graduate school in New York, and we had to work really small and in closed environments, I started doing small acrylics, and that actually has stayed for quite a while. Like, it was really dependent on the type of studio I had, dictated a lot of the work I did.
But then you went big, because now as a muralist, your paintings must be really quite large. Are they? What's the largest you've ever done?
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
For a mural, I did a 60-foot wide mural. It was 6 feet tall. So I remember thinking, wow, that's really big, but I'm quite comfortable doing 6-foot tall murals. So I just kind of thought of it as 10, little smaller paintings. Yeah, I mean, I haven't done the huge ones on the sides of buildings, but yeah, I'm comfortable creating bigger works. When I was in Connecticut, I took a wall in my garage, and I had been doing these oil paintings, and often a painting can take a year or a couple of years for me to finish an oil painting. And at some point, I just got, wow, I really want to do something that's more ephemeral. And I started in 2015 about then, started creating these murals on my wall that I would paint and then paint over, paint and paint over and start again. So it's this really idea of letting go, painting large, not having an attachment to it. And that really led to a lot of the work I do today too.
When you say not have an attachment to it, how does that feel to detach yourself when you're putting so much of yourself into it?
I think for those early garage wall murals, and I love that my son at that time, he was maybe 10, he called it my forever wall. Even though I was painting and washing away, painting and painting over, I remember thinking it was like a lesson in not being attached. And part of it is I've moved so many times. I do recognize that constantly moving, always being the new girl and saying goodbye and saying hello again, saying goodbye and just, the painting over it was just a reinforcement of, yes, you have to get used to loss and saying goodbye and starting over. And that practice can be something. I had this vague idea that if I could practice letting go, I would be able to take more risks in my art practice. I don't know if I really associated with my life, but I remember thinking if I can just, I'll paint whatever I want because no one's going to see this wall. I can take more of a risk and maybe surprises will happen.
Was art then a vehicle for you to transition through all the changes that you've made in life? As you said, the goodbyes, the hellos, the casting off, starting anew. Do you feel that art is an important part of that journey for you to adjust each time with an outlet of painting very large forms too?
Yeah, it definitely was, if I look back now, a way to cope and escape. Dancing, performing too, like having that, putting on a character. And it's something I never would have thought when I was starting out in art school that it would be this way of getting through, expressing my life. I just did not see that. I was really aware of art movements and, the artists that came before me. And, in my 20s, so it would have been like the 90s, I would have thought I'm creating art in this as a response to or referring to like abstract expressionism or, this kind of formal, I was very aware of what was happening in biennials and the art shows in New York. And I was reading all the art magazines. So I thought I was kind of involved in that art world conversation and I think I would have thought talking about my own. And also in the 90s in New York, like portrait art was not really in style at all or figurative. So, but the older I get, yeah, for sure, I could see that I was expressing these stories and these happenings that were going on in my life. And I knew the art was more powerful for it, even though I wasn't really recognized as an artist really ever. I just kind of working them in my house and, maybe showing a little bit at local shows. But I was mostly raising my kids. And it wasn't until recently that, and I just remember being focused. I need to express these problems or these stories I set out to express, but I didn't really, it's just amazing how that personal way of looking at art also applies to a more community focus too.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
How do you feel about letting go then when you've finished a piece?
I now see it as, so I create murals that are using non-permanent earth pigments, and I started out by leaving them outside in the rain, and sometimes I wash them away, and I feel it looks like tears are falling when I'm washing them away, and it just really feels like a cathartic experience, something to help me adjust to change. Often they're for personal stories, like my son's, my first son going to college, and without knowing, I create these paintings of these endangered species, these animals, but they directly relate to like my son, and then my younger son when he went off. And I think I realized looking back that these art works were related to something that's happening to my personal life. And, I feel really sad when I'm creating the art. And then by the time I wash it away, it feels like it just helped me through that process. But, there's still that ghost image that remains. And that is something very comforting to see, like things change, but, the memories are so strong. And I'm usually really grateful for everything that I've experienced.
How soon can you start a new piece then, once you've finished another?
For these vanishing murals, it takes me a while to start up again. Like I have a whale behind me on the studio wall that I think I washed away in, might have been February or March. So it's still there. So it's been a few months. I will probably think about, drawing a new one over it. If there's a deadline, and if I'm working with another group, like a conservation group, I can start again. It's a new project. But to do it on the same wall, there is space, like a time to think about it and process what that experience went through.
And as we said earlier, your parents were very encouraging you of your art and took you to exhibitions, to museums. And so you had early exposure to other artists. Who were you noticing very early on in your childhood? Who was inspiring you?
Oh gosh, my mom said that she used to take us to a museum in California, and she always talks about me standing in front of a painting, just staring at, again, I would have been like 5-ish, 6, there's a famous painting. I don't know, is it John the Baptist where his head is on a severed head on a platter? I don't know. There's some religious painting of this guy with a severed head on a platter. And I remember being 18 and going to the Museum of Modern Art and seeing works like Christina's World and The Boating Party. So I just remember seeing paintings that seemed very melancholy or like Edward Hopper in the storytelling aspect of it, and then also looking at Impressionist art really closely and seeing, they can make a glass just by using these really quick gestural brushstrokes. So, and then when I was in graduate school, I was really focused on Northern Renaissance art. So I really like that kind of paintings where every subject matter, the pigments, are all telling a story.
Are you a collector?
I try not to be, because I've moved so many times that it's just a real hassle moving. I would have said books, but over the years I've had to give up a lot of books. I try not to be, but I still have a clutter of things I buy. I love Hello Kitty things, but I try not to buy them.
I'm wondering if you collect from your own heritage or your own family heritage, because I want to talk about that a little bit, Jana, because you have a very interesting family heritage. And your grandmother, your Okinawan grandmother, practiced ikebana, which is a Japanese floral arrangement there. So you had some introduction to things that were part of your heritage. Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Yeah, my grandmother, she did ikebana. I remember her dancing, like Japanese dance, and listening to Okinawan music. And her father, I remember he always had a camera. I think it was the music and, watching my grandmother and my grandfather watch Japanese TV every night after dinner, that I can hear that in the background. But it seems like it was kind of in the background, not really something I knew about. Both of my grandparents didn't really speak Japanese or Chinese to the kids at all. It was something they spoke with their friends, or, it was just always English. And I think it's now that I've come back to Hawaii, I'm definitely more interested in the Okinawa Club and, the Chinese, the rituals and the culture and being in Hawaii and all that is. So definitely more interested now than I was back then.
Is that on your mother's side, Japanese?
Yeah. My dad's side is Okinawan. Yeah, Japanese. And my mom's side, there's a mix, mainly Chinese.
So it's a very interesting Oriental mix then. I'd imagine that would have been also a source of inspiration artistically for you, given those very different cultures, but so much art heritage there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't realize how different, Japanese Chinese is, let alone my stepfather's Jewish and my birth father's really into like Hawaiian culture. Yeah, again, at University of Hawaii, the art history professors were, we're in the East-West, in the middle Pacific. So a lot of the professors, I had amazing Asian art classes. And looking back, even in high school, like my chemistry teacher and just in the general, those Buddhist principles were kind of always around, that idea of things change, seasons change. And I don't know if that was just a cultural thing. 'Cause I don't think, I was ever taught that. It was just kind of something that was always kind of hovering over our lives.
Did your parents encourage you to get to know your family heritage? Or is this something you inferred just now, that you're more interested in it now than maybe you were when you were younger and have a new appreciation for it?
Yeah, I don't think my grandparents, it was never something really spoken about, but not even in the food. Like my mom, she cooks like Italian, Mediterranean. I think, again, being away from Hawaii, and then seeing, there was a lot of pride. The more questions I asked about, learning about the Japanese being interned, the Japanese internment camps. I had written a paper in intermediate school about the camps, and my stepfather was the attorney for this legal battle between Kaho'olawe, this Hawaiian island, against the U.S. Navy. And I think the more questions I asked about those big moments in history, I started being aware of how much pride there was, and also how humble and, in Hawaii, a lot of people don't speak about their work to put themselves to shine a light on their work, because generally it's felt like you're part of a group, and then no one kind of is like looking for the attention for the work that they do. So I think my generation is also aware of that and is starting to ask more questions and document or share those stories, and knowing how humble and modest and the story of everyone is. So,
can you speak Japanese or Chinese?
No, it's so terrible. I never had to learn a language. I was in this gap year, because now everyone has to learn a language. I think I took Japanese for 1 year in high school, but I can't. And I wish I could.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Just going back to when you were choosing school, you mentioned earlier that you did have your sights set on advertising, and you chose graphic design at the University of Hawaii in Manoa and got your BFA there, graduating in 1991. And then you went to Pratt Institute to do painting. So by then you had decided that was your course. But what drew you initially to take that pathway? When we have to make that decision as to what school we're going to go to and what we're going to study. When you were in high school, what was the pivotal point where you made that decision?
Oh, gosh, that is a big jump, especially coming from Maui. I don't think I knew anyone in graphic design, or I must have been taking art classes at local art schools outside of high school. It's probably I didn't know what else to do. Like, I knew I was better in art than other things. Like, it certainly wasn't math. I really wanted to be an MTV dancer. If you had asked me, I wanted to dance in music videos, but I knew I wasn't good enough for that. So I must have chosen liberal arts, and, graphic design sounds like the way there's a career in art in going that route.
And it was very trendy, wasn't it, back then, to graphic design?
Probably, probably. Yeah. Thanks for saying that, because I was trying to make that connection. Why did I choose that? Yeah. And I was so happy. I took like typography. We drew the letters. I could make my own stretcher bars. I could stretch my own canvases. Computers had just come to UH, but I learned darkroom photography, ceramics. Like, it was a really well-rounded, by hand courses of study, which are pretty cool.
What kind of teenager were you, Jana? Were you patient?
I would say so. I don't know.
You mentioned that you were shy.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you were the shy girl that sat in the corner with a book, or, if you did venture out to parties and, the normal college life?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, once we moved to Maui from Honolulu, and after so many years of always being the new girl, we moved to Maui, and all of a sudden I'm from the big city of Honolulu. So I had more friends, and, my social life really started moving to Maui. I had friends. People are very kind, and, I had people to, I started going out. I was a cheerleader. We, went to football games, and I was performing. So I would say I was still very naturally shy, but, extroverted too. Even now, I'd say there's those different, that dichotomy of being very happy alone working in the studio, but, I love the performing, and I do have close friends. So yeah, it's I guess it's extremes.
But your mother, quite different, must have been extrovert. Rona August, she was a realtor.
Uh-huh.
So a different personality.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
How was your relationship with her?
It's always surprising how much she knows. Again, like how she knew I would be an artist. Like when you say your mother knows best, like it's infuriating sometimes, but she really does. Like she knows. I mean, very intuitively, she knows when we're in trouble or, and I think she is the very creative one. I actually think she's, she never followed an art practice, but she's very creative. And I actually think very athletic too. So I think, we're a lot alike. And as the years go by, I see that more and more.
Would she be more extrovert than you, though? When I saw that she was a realtor, I thought perhaps she'd be more extrovert than you were.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely more. I never thought about that too. Like, someone who's a realtor, because that's something I would never do. Again, you'd have to talk to people like out of the blue. And yeah, for sure. Like we're actually not alike at all, but I guess, yeah, she's very in tune to, and but always been so supportive of who I am, even though I'm so different from her, which thanks for saying that. Cause now I really appreciate how, her, being that way.
And then, of course, graduating as you did in 1999 and very well educated and definitely veering towards a career in the arts. What was the next step for you? Did you find work right out of school?
No, I was married then. And pretty soon after I had my first son, it was after 9/11. And I remember that kind of just shifted everything. Like, I was going to have kids anyway, but I remember that really affected me. And, I had kids. I still was able to paint, but there is a 10-year gap in my resume from like 2002 to 2012, just raising kids. That I remember thinking, wow, I've really done nothing in 10 years, art-wise, but, yeah, so I did. And back then it was before the internet. I don't have art world connections. I never worked in the arts. So, and I was moving a lot. So I would do, shows in the city I lived in. But I was mostly raising kids during those years, the early years.
That's Noah, who's just graduated college, and Kai, who's a sophomore in college. 2 boys. So are they at all interested in art and what you do?
They're very creative. With my art projects, I'll often ask them, what is the best way to tell this story, especially if it's an environmental issue? They're amazing artists. Every year on my birthday or Christmas or a holiday, they'll draw in this big drawing book I have. So they'll draw me a picture, but they don't, they're not pursuing art careers, but I can see that they are very creative and, I have hope that they'll take it up as hobbies, but as of yet, not yet.
At what point then, when you started to take your art very seriously, did you realize that you could actually make a living out of this, that you were selling enough work for it to be sustaining?
A few years before my kids were going off to college, so, the last years in Connecticut, I started realizing, okay, what am I going to do once they're gone? And I had been selling, paintings, thinking about being a teacher. And it wasn't until I did my first mural. It was public art, thinking I could do this. I knew I could tell the stories. But public art became very important to me during the pandemic, and realizing, and before that, I was doing work in, I'd have a show in a gallery and, maybe 200 people would come and see it. I would sell a couple of paintings, but I remember thinking, more people need to see art, and if it's out in the public, more people will see it. So I got like a commission for a bus shelter, and then, did a job with the Nature Conservancy. And I started thinking, I could really make a living off this and be really excited about this direction in my practice.
So why did you choose Vanishing Murals? And that, of course, the name of your website, which we'll put a link to. How did you arrive there?
I was in very late 2019. I was in Connecticut dating someone in Australia, and they had, in December 2019, January 2020, these mega fires that just went through Australia. And I was in Connecticut just watching it on the news, just, seeing the fires, seeing people running towards the beach. And I just remember just being just devastated and almost frozen in fear. And I, after days of watching this on the news, I learned that the koalas couldn't run from the fires. And that just triggered all the emotions, like it broke open. And then COVID happened right after. And I remember thinking to myself, the earth is screaming. I didn't have any words for climate change. That was not on my radar. I just remember thinking the earth is screaming. And I was drawing this small koala, just like a way to cope and process again. And then I remember thinking, not that it's the end of the world, but it felt like it was the end of the world. And I said, what am I doing with art? It doesn't mean anything. It has no meaning. It just makes no sense. And I remember thinking, I want to make an artwork that can't be sold or bought, and that expresses this loss that I feel. And for the first time in my practice, I started thinking, okay, not only do I feel this, but I know everyone is feeling this way. And if not, maybe they're worse off than me. I just remember thinking the whole world is going through this change and loss and fear, but at the same time, hope. And I just thought about it for a few days. And again, I thought a mural. I had been doing those murals in my garage, but the idea of paint seemed so plastic and just couldn't express. And then I remember back in the day when I was younger, we used to have these brush fires on Maui, and I would pick up the charcoal and draw on the rocks. And one day I just thought of drawing this large koala using charcoal from the wildfires. So the guy I was dating at the time had sent me charcoal from the wildfires in Australia. And I conceived of this koala mural that when the rain came, it would wash away and look like tears were falling. And I remember thinking I would call it Vanishing Koala. So for the next 2 years in quarantine, I just drew these murals all over my house, like outside in the wall, in my garage, and I would say Vanishing, whatever the species was. So it felt like I was expressing my pain, like this is vanishing, we're losing this. And it was just a very internal practice for myself. And, it spread to when I started doing work with, groups like the Nature Conservancy or different conservation groups. Every time I come up with a project, I think of, does that word still apply, vanishing this? And it still resonates with me. So it has become a larger practice of what we what we could lose, what we could hold on to. But it was also, again, it had started off as a very small way of me coping by myself in my little house in Connecticut through all these changes.
And I believe you have is it a charcoal drawing of a koala on your website as a print?
Yeah, that's actually drawn in pencil. So before I had thought of...
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
It was a way I remember being so stressed in front of the news. And usually I did large works. So I'd watch the news and I just picked up this pencil and I was just drawing it. And it felt at that time like holding on to something. But now when I do those small, and that was also before I had the charcoal. So that was it's a very personal piece. Like I could see myself I need to hold on to this, just seeing the devastation. But that's pencil. It is the first artwork that was directed towards something outside of me.
So obviously conservation and ecology is important to you. And also colour, it seems. Looking at your work, some of your pieces I've seen on your website, Jana, very vivid colours, very bright, beautiful colours. I'm wondering if that speaks to your personal colour palette and your own fashion and interior design.
Before I started doing these murals, I would have considered myself a pop artist. And I loved, when I was a preteen, looking through magazines and cutting out pictures and making scrapbooks and collecting stickers, like Japanese, like Hello Kitty stickers. So actually looking back at that, that's probably why I like the idea of graphic design and advertising, because I really like Teen Magazine or 17. So I love the pop culture, and pop culture, the music videos, not so much fashion. I love looking at fashion magazines though. Movies like Star Wars, and those bright colors have always been an escape and something that I can just easily throw myself into.
And in terms of your fashion, how does that compare to your color palette?
Oh my gosh, I wish I had a better sense of fashion. My sister worked in high fashion. I'm just always wearing the same black tank top and jeans, so I don't have much fashion. And they all turn into painting clothes.
So when you look at your work now and the journey that you've taken, but physically, the miles that you've covered and travelled, how you've travelled through your own art journey, what would you say were the pivotal moments, the milestones?
One was that first day I took that oil painting class. After that, it was usually a really big life change. or something. And it's only looking back that I see it. Like something big had to happen. Like, 9/11, my kids growing up moving out, or, being separated from a loved one in Australia, or the wildfires, or knowing, maybe a natural disaster. Like, I think when something like that happens, my first instinct is to pick up, some kind of pigment and say, how do I share this feeling inside of me? Even though if I don't know exactly what it is at the time, I can look back and say, oh, it was because of that.
And how about the relationship, the relationships that you've been through, how they may have impacted your artistic, your bent, maybe your motivation, your emotional motivation, so to speak. You mentioned your ex-husband. I mean, the end of a major relationship like that, the father of your children, sometimes that means that we need to escape. And you've mentioned that art has been an escape for you before. How did you navigate your relationships through your art?
Yeah, probably that's one of the biggest influence. And it's also something I don't have words for. So it's huge. I probably don't know how to express them, but I can try to express them by going into the studio. Sometimes I listen to certain songs that will have a personal meaning, and I used to put those titles or the lyrics of those songs into paintings. But I think that's probably one of the biggest things, and expressing who I am or what I want to be in these relationships, or going through the loss of one or the end of one, has always been a really big underlying story of my work, for sure, definitely.
Do you feel you've reached a point in your journey then, emotionally, physically, and geographically, that with your artwork you are where you're meant to be now? You're centered in your work?
Yeah. It's like the Wizard of Oz. Like I was home. Like you're just so, like I was always there, but now I'm so much more aware of, again, it's one of those things I have a hard time expressing, but all the work, the travel, the moves, the technique I picked up along the way, the stories I've told, everything I've done. Like there's no way I would have ever said, I want to be a conservation artist who works with scientists. Like that's just not something I ever would have said. Like, and it was a goal I never could have headed towards. It only became because this happened and that happened. And, it just kind of resulted in this without me aiming for it. And at the same time, I finally feel fulfilled and that I have a purpose in my art that I had been searching for decades, finding that purpose and meaning. And I was able to fulfill it in my daily practice, but on this like the larger scale, like I definitely feel it was all leading towards me coming home to Hawaii and working with the community that I am here.
Which equals fulfillment and satisfaction, it seems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering then now, it might be here today and gone tomorrow. I'm just wondering how that impacts you, because it's not sustained. If it's vanished, the satisfaction comes in the creating.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering how the legacy of that piece stays with you. How do you hold that?
I see these vanishing murals like experiences, like there's a journey, very similar to the dance performances or the theater performances I was in, or the practice of like Buddhist monks washing away their sand mandalas. Like, there's the creation and then the destruction is all part of this experience. And, and that's part of it, the letting go of it. So whether or not there's anything left behind to hold or view, I mean, that's the point of it, having gone through that whole process.
So how do you define success?
Before I went to New York, a writer that I really admired said that his goal was not to be this author that, just sold a gazillion books. He was looking for the respect of maybe 10% of writers in his field. And I remember thinking, well, I love that. I really want to be really respected in the art community for creating these really amazing, meaningful paintings. And I didn't know what that meant. Now that I'm 57, I would say success means creating art that I'm really proud of. That means a lot to me and that expresses a story in myself, or if I create a problem that I can solve that problem. But success for me would also mean that my art could also help the community, or if I could go back to Maui or in the islands and kind of be a part of the future of Hawaii, give back in that way, but also be a part of that. My creative voice is so strong that it's seen as part of a larger conversation.
So what next for you, Jana? What are you working on now, and what does the rest of 2025 look like for you, for your work?
I think most of my work will continue to be about oceans and, coral reefs. There's a project I'm developing against deep sea mining, and it's all kind of related, coral reefs, ocean floor, even our native birds, everything is related in our environment here. Continuing to work with environmental groups. And on a personal level, I am writing a children's book, and I'm really excited to be working with different groups in the community and, using art to help share their stories. So I'm really excited.
It sounds like you're a very busy woman.
Yeah. People don't realize, like, the art is such a small part of the day. The other, as you can imagine, I'm sure the rest of it is like the admin or the marketing or, just doing small things. So yeah, it takes a lot of time, but yeah, really, really grateful for all of it.
Well, it sounds like you're in a very good place now, Jana, and it's lovely to hear that, and a very interesting journey that you've had, but lots more to come. And I wish you the very, very best for all of your artwork and for your writings too. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the podcast and share your story.
Thank you so much. It was really so grateful to speak to you and also have this conversation and hear your input also on what we talked about. It was eye-opening for me too.
And don't forget to hop over to our YouTube channel where you'll see extended conversation. That's on the Art Podcast. Don't forget 2 A's in art. And you'll find a lot more episodes of extended conversations and bonus content with many of our guests. So be sure to check us out there. Give us a follow, of course, and subscribe so you'll be the first to know when new content has landed on our YouTube channel. And if you enjoy the show, then please do share this with anyone else you think might enjoy it too. And give us a follow on social media. We're at The Art Podcast on Instagram. And you can reach us, of course, via email if you prefer. That's theartpodcast@gmail.com. Art, as always, with 2 A's. And if you have any suggestions for guests, we always would love to hear from you. Don't forget, if you have a chance while you're on your podcast app, to give us a 5-star rating and review, because that helps others find the show by raising our visibility amongst the thousands and thousands, no, millions of podcasts out there. So please do give us a shout out on your podcast app as well. My thanks again to my guest, Jana Ireijo, and to you for listening. I'll be back in 2 weeks' time when my guest will be the multidisciplinary artist and designer Hannah Polskin. So I do hope you'll join me then.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.